The ancient Egyptians never tasted a grapefruit, neither did the Greeks. The Romans planted citrus trees, medieval kings traded exotic fruits, and explorers carried oranges across oceans, but none of them had ever seen a grapefruit. Not because it was too rare, not because it was hidden in some distant jungle, but because it did not exist yet. The grapefruit is one of the youngest major fruits on Earth. It was not slowly domesticated from a wild ancestor over thousands of years. It was not carefully designed by royal gardeners, and nobody crossed two trees while trying to create it. The fruit appears to have been born accidentally on the Caribbean island of Barbados, after two citrus plants from Asia met in a place neither of them naturally belonged. One was the pomelo, large, thick-skinned, and ancient. The other was the sweet orange, smaller, sweeter, and already the product of an older citrus hybridization. At some point after both fruits arrived in the Caribbean, pollen moved between them, perhaps carried by an insect, perhaps blown between nearby trees. A seed formed, someone planted it, or it fell into fertile ground, and from that seed grew something the world had never seen before. A fruit larger than an orange, smaller than the biggest pomelo, juicy, fragrant, acidic, and unmistakably bitter. It was not fully one parent or the other, it was something new. The grapefruit had entered history by accident, but the strange fruit did not arrive in an empty paradise. Barbados in the 17th and 18th centuries was a busy British colony. Ships moved between Europe, Africa, the Caribbean, and the Americas. Plants traveled with sailors, merchants, settlers, and plantation owners. Seeds crossed oceans inside bags, barrels, pockets, and ship holds. Citrus trees from Asia had already traveled enormous distances before reaching the Caribbean. Their ancestors grew thousands of miles away, but trade placed them together on one small island. That mattered because citrus plants cross surprisingly easily. Oranges, mandarins, pomelos, citrons, and other citrus relatives can exchange pollen and produce hybrids. Many familiar citrus fruits are therefore not clean, separate species in the way people imagine. They are mixtures. Lemons contain ancestry from older citrus types. Sweet oranges are hybrids. Limes have complicated family trees, and grapefruit was another branch created when existing branches crossed again. Its birth was new, but its parents carried ancient genetic histories inside them. The pomelo contributed much of the grapefruit's size, thick rind, and bitterness. The sweet orange contributed sweetness, fragrance, and a softer, juicier interior. The result was still harsher than the modern grapefruit. Early fruits were generally pale-fleshed, heavily seeded, and often more bitter than the red varieties found in supermarkets today. But on Barbados, their unusual taste attracted attention. The islanders did not initially call them grapefruits. They didn't even fully agree what they were. Some saw them as a form of pomelo, others grouped them with fruits known as shaddocks, and some gave the mysterious citrus a far more dramatic name, the forbidden fruit. In 1550, the Welsh clergyman and naturalist Griffith Hughes published a description of Barbados and its plants. Among the island's citrus fruits, he described something called the forbidden fruit. Historians have debated whether Hughes's fruit was exactly the grapefruit known today or a closely related Caribbean citrus. Early descriptions were often imprecise. Writers compared unfamiliar fruits with familiar ones. Different islands used the same names for different citrus varieties, and the trees themselves continued crossing with one another. But Hughes's account became part of grapefruit history because it captures the confusion surrounding the new fruit. It had no ancient name, no long agricultural tradition, no clearly recorded inventor. It had appeared in the Caribbean, and people were still trying to decide what they were looking at. Another story involved a mysterious sailor called Captain Shattuck. According to tradition, Captain Shattuck brought pomelo seeds from Asia to the Caribbean during the 17th century. Large pomelos were consequently called shaddocks in parts of the English-speaking Caribbean. For years, citrus historians struggled to determine whether Captain Shattuck was real or merely a legend created to explain the fruit's name. Later researchers found evidence of a Captain Shattuck who sailed through the West Indies. That does not mean he created grapefruit. At most, someone like him may have helped bring one of its parents into the region. The actual hybridization probably happened later and without anyone noticing. No sailor stepped ashore carrying a grapefruit. He may have carried a pomelo seed. The Caribbean did the rest. For decades, the new fruit remained trapped inside a maze of names: shaddock, pomelo, forbidden fruit, smaller shaddock, Barbados fruit. Botanists were trying to organize citrus into clear categories, but citrus refused to cooperate. Two trees could look different, yet cross easily. Seedlings from one fruit could produce descendants unlike the parent. A branch could suddenly mutate and begin producing fruit of a new color. Citrus looked orderly from the outside. Inside, its family history was chaos. Eventually, people began calling it grapefruit. The name had nothing to do with its taste. It did not taste like a grape. It did not look like a grape. The explanation was hanging from the tree. Unlike oranges that often appear individually among the leaves, grapefruit can grow in visible clusters. Several large yellow fruits hang close together, resembling an enormous bunch of grapes. The strange comparison stayed. A fruit with no connection to grapes became the grapefruit simply because of the way it gathered on its branches. Botanists eventually gave it an equally dramatic scientific name: Citrus paradisi, the citrus of paradise. The name treated grapefruit as its own species, but later research revealed that it was a hybrid. Its scientific name was adjusted to Citrus X paradisi, with the multiplication symbol marking its mixed origin. Even its botanical identity had to be rewritten once scientists understood what Barbados had created. Yet grapefruit might have remained a Caribbean curiosity without another journey. During the early 19th century, it reached Florida. Tradition credits a Frenchman named Odette Philippe with helping establish grapefruit near Safety Harbor on the western coast of Florida. Details of Philippe's life became surrounded by stories. He was described as a count, a doctor, a former naval surgeon, a man connected to Napoleon. Some claims are difficult to confirm, but his importance to Florida citrus is much clearer. He cultivated citrus plants obtained through the Caribbean and helped establish grapefruit in Florida's warm climate.
There, the fruit found the conditions needed for its next transformation. Florida offered heat, sunlight, sandy soil, and growers already interested in citrus. But grapefruit was not immediately a commercial success. It had serious problems. It was bitter. It was unfamiliar. Its thick membranes made it harder to eat than an orange, and early fruits could contain an astonishing number of seeds. One of the oldest important Florida varieties became known as Duncan. Its ancestor was reportedly growing near Safety Harbor by around 1830, although the Duncan name came later. The fruit was large and juicy. Its flavor became a standard against which other grapefruits were judged. But one grapefruit could contain dozens of seeds, sometimes as many as 60. Imagine serving half a grapefruit at breakfast and removing seed after seed before reaching the flesh. Duncan tasted excellent, but convenience would eventually defeat it. The solution appeared through another accident. On a Florida property, a grapefruit seedling produced fruit with far fewer seeds. This variety became known as marsh seedless. Seedless did not necessarily mean it contained no seeds at all, but compared with the seed-filled Duncan, it was revolutionary. Marsh fruit was manageable. It stored well, it survived shipping, it could be cut in half and eaten with a spoon without turning breakfast into an excavation project. By the early 20th century, marsh had become one of the world's dominant commercial grapefruit varieties. The fruit, born accidentally in Barbados, was now being reshaped by accidental seedlings in Florida. But it was still mostly pale. The classic grapefruit of the 19th century had yellow skin and light-colored flesh. Its flavor could be refreshing, but it was visually less exciting than a bright orange or red apple. Then, a tree changed color. In the early 20th century, growers discovered branches producing fruit with pink flesh. These were not the result of planting an entirely new species. They were bud mutations. A single group of cells inside a branch had changed. That branch began producing fruit different from the rest of the tree. Growers could cut buds from the unusual branch, graft them onto rootstocks, and create entire orchards carrying the mutation. This is one of the strangest features of fruit agriculture. A single branch can become an industry. The Thompson pink grapefruit, discovered in Florida, became an important early pink variety. Its color was mild, but when it was planted in Texas, the story changed again. The lower Rio Grande Valley offered heat, sunshine, and unusual soil conditions. In 1929, growers discovered branches producing fruit with much deeper red flesh.
Two nurserymen found mutations in their orchards. One variety became ruby red, another became red blush. Ruby red received United States plant patent number 53, placing a grapefruit mutation among the earliest patented plants in American history. For the first time, a fruit variety could be legally protected as an invention. But nobody intentionally invented the mutation. Nature changed a branch. Humans noticed, multiplied it, named it, patented it, and sold it. Red flesh transformed grapefruit. Color changed expectation. A pale fruit looked sour. A ruby-colored fruit looked sweet, rich, and modern. Texas built an identity around red grapefruit. Boxes carried glamorous labels. Advertisements showed shining halves filled with pink juice. Growers promoted the fruit as something distinct from ordinary white grapefruit. Later varieties became darker, sweeter, and more visually intense. The grapefruit had started as an uncontrolled mixture of two citrus parents. Now farmers were searching through mutations for exactly the colors consumers wanted. But growers still faced one fundamental problem. Grapefruit was bitter. The bitterness comes from natural citrus compounds, especially in the membranes and tissues surrounding the juice. That bitterness helps make grapefruit refreshing. It also makes many people dislike it immediately. Oranges reward the first bite with sweetness. Grapefruit often challenges the eater before offering anything pleasant. So people developed rituals to control it. They cut the fruit in half. They loosened each segment with a special curved knife. They sprinkled sugar across the surface. Some added honey. Others placed the halves beneath a grill until the sugar caramelized. Special spoons were designed with sharp edges to cut through the membranes. Grapefruit did not simply enter breakfast. Breakfast equipment changed to accommodate it. By the early 20th century, half a grapefruit became an image of refinement. It appeared in hotels, restaurants, dining cars, and fashionable homes. Served chilled in a glass dish, it suggested cleanliness and modern living. It looked bright on a white tablecloth. It could be prepared before the main meal. And because it was acidic and not extremely sweet, it felt healthier than pastries or fried food. That reputation would soon become more powerful than the fruit itself. Grapefruit became attached to the promise of weight loss. During the 1920s and 30s, versions of an 18-day diet or Hollywood diet circulated in the United States. Menus combined grapefruit with eggs, toast, vegetables, coffee, and small portions of other foods. Later versions claimed the fruit contained a special enzyme that burned fat. The claim was attractive because it promised a shortcut. A person would not merely eat less, they would eat a fruit that supposedly attacked fat for them. But the dramatic weight loss associated with such plans largely came from severe calorie restriction, not a magical grapefruit enzyme. The fruit became famous for powers it did not possess. It was the Roman cabbage story repeated in modern form. Take an ordinary food, attach an extraordinary medical claim, and allow hope to do the marketing. The grapefruit diet faded and returned repeatedly. Every generation received a slightly different version. Some demanded grapefruit before every meal. Some allowed unlimited meat. Some promised enormous weight loss in only days. The rules changed because the rules were never the important part. The important part was the grapefruit. Its bitterness felt medicinal. Its acidity felt powerful. Its low sweetness made it seem disciplined. People assumed that something so sharp must be doing something dramatic inside the body. Grapefruit became the fruit of self-control. A person eating half a grapefruit was not simply having breakfast, they were making a statement. But while grapefruit did not possess the mythical power to melt fat, it did possess a chemical ability far stranger than the diet advertisements imagined. It could change the way the human body processed medicine. And that discovery was also an accident. In 1989, researchers were studying whether alcohol affected a blood pressure medication called felodipine.
To conduct the experiment properly, they needed to hide the taste of alcohol so participants would not know which drink they had received. Grapefruit juice was strong enough to mask it. The researchers expected alcohol to be the interesting part. Instead, blood tests showed unexpectedly high levels of the medication. At first, the result made little sense.
Then the researchers realized the grapefruit juice itself was interfering with the drug. A fruit born through an accidental plant crossing had revealed its greatest medical secret through an accidental laboratory choice. The human body uses enzymes to break down many medicines. One important enzyme, known as CYP3A4, is found in the small intestine and elsewhere in the body. Normally, it destroys part of certain drugs before they reach the bloodstream. Doctors calculate doses with that loss in mind, but grapefruit contains compounds called furanocoumarins. These can interfere with the enzyme. When the enzyme is blocked, more of certain medicines may enter the bloodstream than expected. A normal dose can behave like a larger dose. With some medications, grapefruit affects transport proteins instead, potentially reducing how much medicine is absorbed. That means grapefruit does not produce one simple universal reaction. It can increase the effect of some drugs, decrease the effect of others, or do nothing at all, depending on the medication. This is why the warning is not merely "do not swallow your pill with grapefruit juice." For certain drugs, separating them by a few hours may not remove the risk. The effect can continue after the fruit has been consumed. Medicine labels, pharmacists, and doctors therefore warn patients about specific grapefruit interactions. A breakfast fruit had become powerful enough to alter prescription instructions. The irony was extraordinary. For decades, grapefruit had been marketed as a health food. It represented vitamins, dieting, freshness, clean mornings. Then, science revealed that this healthy fruit could become dangerous when combined with certain medicines. The grapefruit itself was not poisonous. The medicine itself could be safe. The danger appeared only when the two met. Just as grapefruit had been created when two harmless citrus parents met in Barbados, a new effect appeared when grapefruit chemistry met modern pharmacology. Combination created the fruit. Combination created the warning. Meanwhile, breeders continued trying to improve it. Consumers wanted less bitterness, more sweetness, darker flesh, fewer seeds, longer storage, better resistance to disease. But grapefruit breeding is difficult. A commercial tree cannot simply be replaced every season like wheat or lettuce. Trees take years to mature. A promising seedling may require a decade of observation, and seedlings do not always reproduce the qualities of their parents. For that reason, much of grapefruit history has depended on cloning. Growers take a bud from a valuable tree and graft it onto another root system. The new tree carries the same fruit-producing genetics as the original branch. An orchard may therefore contain thousands of trees that are genetic copies of one exceptional mutation. That creates consistency. But consistency carries risk. If every tree shares similar weaknesses, one disease can threaten them all. Modern citrus industries face destructive pests and diseases, including citrus greening. Infected trees decline, produce poor fruit, and may eventually become unproductive. Florida, once one of the great centers of grapefruit culture, has suffered enormous citrus losses. Researchers now search wild citrus relatives, unusual hybrids, and preserved genetic collections for traits that might help future trees survive. The same biological complexity that once made grapefruit difficult to classify may become the resource that saves it. Its mixed ancestry is not merely a historical curiosity. It is a genetic toolbox. And grapefruit has continued crossing with other citrus. Cross grapefruit with a mandarin, and you can produce tangelos. Cross selected grapefruit relatives again, and breeders can adjust sweetness, color, size, and chemical composition. Researchers have even explored whether new grapefruit-like fruits could be produced with fewer of the compounds responsible for medication interactions. That would create another strange chapter. A fruit born accidentally, changed through spontaneous mutations, then deliberately redesigned so it would interfere less with modern medicine. But even if that succeeds, the original grapefruit story will remain unusual. Most major crops carry histories stretching back into prehistory. Wheat accompanied the first farming villages. Dates fed ancient desert cities. Grapes filled Greek and Roman cups. Apples moved through Central Asia long before written records. Grapefruit has no ancient ruins, no prehistoric seeds, no mythological harvest god. Its entire history fits within the modern era. It is younger than many cities, younger than the printing press, younger than several universities.
And yet, within only a few centuries, it traveled from one Caribbean island into orchards across the world. It changed color, lost most of its seeds, entered luxury breakfasts, became the center of a diet craze, received one of America's earliest plant patents, and forced pharmaceutical companies to place warnings on medicine. All because two trees that had traveled from Asia happened to grow close enough to exchange pollen. No farmer planned the cross. No scientist recorded the first seed. No king ordered the fruit's creation. The person who first saw it may not have even realized it was new. They may have assumed it was a strange pomelo, a poor orange, an unusually bitter shaddock. But accidental creation does not mean insignificant creation. The grapefruit reminds us that agriculture is not controlled entirely by human intention.
People transport plants. They arrange orchards. They save seeds. They graft branches. But pollen moves without permission. Genes combine without a plan. Branches mutate. Seedlings surprise their growers. Human beings guide the process, but nature keeps introducing new possibilities. Barbados provided the meeting place. The pomelo and sweet orange provided the genes. An insect or wind may have carried the pollen. A seed carried the result. And the world received a fruit no ancient person had ever tasted. A fruit first confused with its parents, then called forbidden, then named after grapes, then colored red by mutation, then turned into a symbol of health, and finally discovered to possess enough chemical power to change how medicines work. The grapefruit was never supposed to exist. But neither are most of the foods we now consider ordinary. They are products of migration, crossing, selection, mutation, trade, weather, and luck. Today, a grapefruit sits quietly in the supermarket beside oranges and lemons as though it has always belonged there. Its yellow skin does not reveal Barbados. Its pink flesh does not reveal the mutated branch. Its bitter juice does not reveal the medicine warning. And its name does not reveal that it has nothing to do with grapes. But cut it open, and you are looking at one of agriculture's most successful accidents. A Caribbean fruit with Asian parents, a forbidden fruit from paradise, and a reminder that sometimes history is not planned. Sometimes it simply grows. If this story changed the way you look at grapefruit, subscribe to Food Through Time for more hidden histories behind the fruits and vegetables that shaped the world. And tell us in the comments, would you choose the original bitter white grapefruit or the modern ruby red?